The crystal glass in Sujin's hand trembled, a delicate vessel for the venom she was about to spew. Her voice, sharp as shattered champagne flutes, sliced through the polite murmur of the grand ballroom. "I left him, you know," she announced to the cluster of reporters and socialites who had gathered around her like wolves to a wounded doe. "I left him because he was weak, too weak to be his father's son, too weak to lead." Across the cavernous room, Jinwoo Quan heard every word. He did not flinch. He did not turn. His posture remained a study in stillness, a black and white photograph in a world of chaotic color. His custom-tailored tuxedo fit his shoulders like a second skin, a suit of armor for a king who had grown weary of his crown. The whispers followed her pronouncement, a ripple of scandal spreading through the opulent hall he had paid for, a celebration of the very change she mocked. He felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, all of them hungry for a reaction. A flicker of anger, a hint of shame. He gave them nothing. His gaze, dark and unreadable, drifted over the sea of curious faces, over the flashbulbs of cameras, over the woman who wore his name like a stolen jewel. He searched for the only thing in the room that mattered, and then he found her. Maya Jones stood near the towering French doors that led to the balcony, a silhouette against the glittering Seoul skyline. She wore a simple, elegant navy dress, a stark contrast to the diamond-dusted peacocks surrounding her. She looked uncertain, her hands clasped in front of her, a beautiful, wild thing caught in a gilded cage. Their eyes met across the distance, and the noise of the room, the sting of his ex-wife's words, the crushing weight of his entire world. It all faded into a dull, distant hum. He saw the question in her eyes. "Are you okay?" A slow smile touched Jinwoo's lips. It was not a smile for the crowd. It was not a smile of defiance for his former wife. It was a private, intimate thing, meant only for her. It was a promise. It was an answer. It was everything. And in that single, silent exchange, he told her all she needed to know. The past was nothing. The noise was nothing. She was the only one who could make him feel strong. 3 months earlier, the world had been a different kind of loud. The rain had been relentless that Tuesday, a percussive drumming against the windows of his armored sedan. Outside, Seoul was a blur of neon and water. Inside, the silence was suffocating, thick with the things his second-in-command, Min Jun, was not saying. Another deal had gone south. Another body had to be managed. Another piece of his soul had been chipped away, bartered for the family name. "Stop the car," Jinwoo had commanded, his voice flat. Min Jun glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with concern. "Sir, we are still 2 blocks from the designated safe house." "I know where we are, Min Jun. Stop the car." The vehicle slid to a silent halt by the curb. Without another word, Jinwoo pushed the door open and stepped out into the deluge. He ignored Min Jun's call, pulling the collar of his coat up against the cold spray. He needed air. He needed to escape the sterile, blood-soaked cage of his life, if only for a moment. He walked, letting the rain plaster his black hair to his forehead, the water soaking through the shoulders of his $1,000 coat. He did not know where he was going. He just walked. Then he saw it. A small, fogged-up window glowing with a warm, inviting light. "The Daily Grind," the sign read in simple English script. A coffee shop. It was mundane. It was normal. It was everything he was not. On pure impulse, he pushed the door open, a small bell chiming his arrival. The air inside was warm and smelled of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon. It was a small space with only a few mismatched tables and chairs, and behind the counter there was a woman. She was wiping down the espresso machine, her back to him. She moved with an easy, unhurried grace, humming softly to a song playing from a small speaker. She wore a simple black apron over a faded t-shirt, her hair pulled up in a messy but beautiful knot of intricate braids. When she turned, he felt it. A jolt. It was not like lightning. It was quieter, more profound. It was the sudden, jarring silence after a lifetime of noise. The world, which had been spinning at a dizzying, violent pace, simply stopped. She had warm, intelligent eyes that seemed to see more than they should, and a smile that hesitated on her lips as she took in his drenched, imposing figure. "Whoa," she said, her voice a low, melodious hum that sent an unexpected shiver down his spine. "Looks like you swam here. Can I get you a towel? Or maybe a boat?" Jinwoo just stood there, dripping onto the worn linoleum floor. He, a man who commanded legions with a single word, who could face down assassins without a flicker of fear, was rendered speechless. He was captivated. Her beauty was not the polished, perfect kind he was accustomed to in his world. It was real. It was authentic. It was in the slight furrow of her brow as she looked at him, a mixture of concern and amusement. "Coffee," he finally managed to say, his own voice sounding foreign in the cozy space. "Black." "Coming right up," she said, her smile widening slightly. "One black coffee for the handsome, mysterious, and very wet stranger." He watched her as she moved, her hands efficient and sure as she ground the beans and worked the machine. He was Kwon Jin-woo, head of the Golden Dragon Syndicate, a man whose name was whispered with fear in the darkest corners of the city. But in that moment, standing in a tiny coffee shop, he was just a man. A man who had just seen the first thing he wanted for himself in a very, very long time. That was the beginning. The frozen moment. The instant his life bifurcated into two distinct eras. Before her and after her. Maya watched the man take his coffee. He paid with a bill so large she had to check it twice, telling her to keep the change with a dismissive wave of his hand. He took a seat at the small table in the corner, the one with the wobbly leg, and simply sat there, staring into his cup as if it held the secrets of the universe. He was, without a doubt, the most intimidating man she had ever seen. It was not just his size, though he was tall and broad-shouldered, or the expensive, ridiculously soaked coat. It was the stillness. An aura of coiled power radiated from him, a dangerous quiet that made the little bell on the door seem frivolous. His face was a masterpiece of sharp angles and stark beauty, marred only by a faint, silvery scar that traced the line of his jaw. It made him look less perfect and more lethal. He made her nervous. He also made her incredibly curious. Men like him did not just wander into her little coffee shop. Her clientele consisted of students, office workers, and the occasional lost tourist. He looked like he owned the entire city block, maybe the whole city. "This is creepy," her roommate Chloe declared 2 days later, peering over Maya's shoulder at the man in the corner. He was back. Same table, same black coffee, same unnerving stillness. He had been there every day since the rainy Tuesday. He would arrive at 10 in the morning, order one coffee, and sit for hours. He never read. He never used a phone. He just watched. Mostly, he watched her. "He's not creepy," Maya whispered back, though she was not entirely sure she believed it. "He's quiet, and he tips well." "He tips like he's laundering money," Chloe retorted, snapping her gum. "And he looks at you like you're the last life raft on the Titanic." "I'm telling you, Maya, that's not a normal customer. That's a stalker. A very handsome, very rich stalker, but a stalker nonetheless." Maya sighed, wiping a clean spot on the counter. "He hasn't done anything. He just sits there. That's what they all do at first. Then comes the unsolicited poetry and the single perfect rose left on your doorstep. Next thing you know, you're in a soundproofed basement somewhere." "You watch too many movies," Maya said, but a sliver of unease worked its way under her skin. The man, she had learned his name was Jin-woo from his credit card, was an enigma. His gaze was intense, possessive even, but there was a deep, profound loneliness in it that she found herself responding to. It was a look she recognized, a quieter echo of the ache she sometimes felt in her own chest, working 2 jobs just to keep her head above water in a city that could be as unforgiving as it was beautiful. The next day, Jin-woo broke his routine. As she was getting ready to close up shop, he approached the counter. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. He smelled of expensive cologne and something else, something clean and sharp like winter air. "I would like to buy all of your remaining pastries," he said, his voice a low rumble. Maya blinked. "All of them? There's like 3 dozen croissants and a whole tray of muffins." "Yes, all of them." He gestured to the display case. "Okay," she said slowly, starting to box them up. "Big party?" "No." She waited for him to elaborate. He did not. The silence stretched, filled only by the crinkle of wax paper. "Right, so you're just a really big fan of day-old muffins?" she quipped, her sarcasm a familiar shield. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Amusement. "I noticed you stay late to clean every night. I thought if you sold out early, you could go home early." Maya stopped what she was doing, her hands frozen on a chocolate croissant. She stared at him. It was the most absurd, extravagant, and strangely thoughtful gesture she had ever encountered. It was also completely insane. "You bought $40 worth of pastries you don't want so I could get off work 30 minutes early?" "Yes." He said it as if it were the most logical thing in the world. She did not know what to say. Her mind raced, trying to categorize him. He was not just a stalker. He was something else entirely, something more complicated and more dangerous to her carefully constructed peace. "You can't do that," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "I just did," he replied, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Will you have dinner with me, Maya?" There it was, the question she had been half expecting and fully dreading. Chloe's warnings screamed in her head. Soundproofed basement. But her own intuition whispered something different. It pointed to the sadness in his eyes, the strange gentleness in his ridiculously grand gesture. "I don't even know you," she deflected. "My name is Jinwoo Kwon. I enjoy black coffee, sitting in this chair." He nodded toward his corner table. "And apparently buying pastries in bulk. Now you know me. Dinner, tomorrow night." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "That's awfully confident of you," she said, crossing her arms. "I am a confident man," he said simply. "But I am asking. Please." The please undid her. It was quiet, almost vulnerable, a crack in the marble facade. It made him seem human. She let out a long breath. "Fine, one dinner, but you're not allowed to buy the entire restaurant." The smile that broke across his face was like a punch to the chest. It was dazzling. It transformed his severe features into something breathtakingly handsome. "I will try to restrain myself," he promised. He had not restrained himself. The restaurant was on the top floor of a skyscraper that seemed to scrape the stars from the sky. The view of Seoul was a sprawling galaxy of lights below them. Each table was an island of privacy, and the waiters moved with the silent, unobtrusive grace of ghosts. Maya felt her 5-year-old dress, the nicest thing she owned, shrink under the weight of the opulence. "This is a bit much, don't you think?" she murmured, taking a sip of water from a crystal goblet that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Jinwoo looked around as if seeing the place for the first time. "Is it? I apologize. I do not go out often. My assistant booked it." Of course he had an assistant. "Well, your assistant has very expensive taste." "I will tell him you approve," he said, his expression completely serious, and she had to bite back a laugh. She was not sure if his dryness was intentional, but it was disarming. The awkwardness of the setting soon faded as he began to talk, or rather, as he began to ask her questions. He wanted to know everything. About her dream of being a graphic designer, the freelance projects she took on after her shifts at the coffee shop. About her childhood in Chicago, her decision to move to Seoul for a change of scenery. He listened with an unnerving intensity, his dark eyes fixed on her, making her feel like she was the only person in the universe. She found herself opening up to him in a way she rarely did with anyone, not even Chloe. She told him about the constant struggle, the feeling of running in place, the quiet fear that she would be stuck serving coffee forever. "Why do you do it?" he asked, his voice soft. "The coffee shop. You are talented. Your design work should be your focus." Maya gave a short, humorless laugh. "Because talent doesn't pay the bills. The coffee shop does. It's survival." "Survival," he repeated, the word tasting strange on his tongue. He looked out the window at the glittering city he commanded. "I understand survival." "Somehow, I doubt your version of survival involves deciding between paying the electric bill or buying groceries," she said, a hint of her usual sarcasm returning. His gaze snapped back to her, and the loneliness was there again, stark and deep. "No," he said quietly. "My version is different." For a moment, she saw past the wealth and the power. She saw a man in a cage, albeit a very luxurious one. A profound sadness emanated from him, a silent scream she felt in her own bones. She reached across the table, her fingers impulsively brushing against his. His hand was cold, but he flinched as if she had burned him. He turned his hand over and laced his fingers with hers, his grip surprisingly tight, almost desperate. "Don't feel sorry for me, Maya," he whispered, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "I don't," she whispered back. I think I understand." And in that moment, she was terrified to realize that she did. The weeks that followed were a blur of contradictions. Jinwoo was a whirlwind, pulling her into a world she could barely comprehend. There were more dinners at impossible-to-book restaurants, private viewings at art galleries after hours, and drives along the coast in cars that moved with a silent, predatory speed. Yet, for all the grandeur, the moments she cherished were the quiet ones. The times he would show up at her apartment door, holding a bag of takeout from a hole-in-the-wall noodle shop he knew she loved. The way he would sit on her lumpy sofa, looking completely out of place in his perfect suit, and watch her sketch, his presence a calming, protective weight. But the shadows were always there, clinging to the edges of their bubble. There was Minjun, his loyal watchdog, always lurking nearby, his eyes constantly scanning, his hand never far from the bulge under his jacket. There were the phone calls Jinwoo would take, walking away from her, his voice dropping to a low, cold command in Korean, his entire demeanor shifting into that of a ruler addressing his subjects. "What is it you do exactly?" she asked him one night as they lay on a blanket in a deserted park, staring up at the stars. She had asked before, but he had always been evasive. "Investments." "Family business." Vague, meaningless terms. He went still beside her. "It is complicated." "Try me," she pushed gently. "Is it legal?" The silence that followed her question was a physical thing, cold and heavy. It pressed down on her, stealing the air from her lungs. "Jinwoo?" He sat up, his back to her. "Some of it is. Much of it is not." Her heart began to beat a frantic, panicked rhythm against her ribs. Chloe's voice. Not a normal customer. The ever-present guards. The fear in the eyes of waiters and doormen when he entered a room. It all began to click into place, forming a picture she did not want to see. "What does that mean?" she asked, her own voice trembling slightly. "What kind of not legal are we talking about? Tax evasion or something else?" He turned to face her, and in the pale moonlight his face was a mask of torment. "It means I inherited an empire, Maya. An empire built by my father on foundations of violence, fear, and control. I am the head of my family, and my family, we are not good people." The confession hung in the air between them. It was not a soundproofed basement, but it was a cage all the same. A cage he was trapped in, and a cage he was inviting her into. "You mean, like the mob?" The words felt ridiculous, like something from one of Chloe's movies. "A Korean syndicate, yes," he confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion. "The Golden Dragons. We control shipping ports, nightlife, construction, and other, less savory enterprises. It is my duty, my birthright, my prison." Maya scrambled to her feet, backing away from him as if he were on fire. Her mind reeled. The man who listened so intently, who bought pastries so she could go home early, who looked at her with such aching tenderness. He was a gangster, a crime boss. Why? She choked out. Why would you tell me this? Because I am falling in love with you, he said, the words raw and exposed. He stood up, but did not move toward her. And you cannot love a man you do not know. This is who I am. Tears streamed down her face, hot and fast. Tears of fear, of confusion, of a terrible, terrible heartbreak that was already beginning. She saw it all now, the danger, the violence that must lurk just beneath his calm surface, the blood that surely stained the money he spent so freely. I can't, she whispered, shaking her head. I can't do this, Jinwoo. I can't be a part of that world. His face crumpled, the first genuine, unguarded expression of pain she had ever seen from him. It was 1,000 times worse than his anger or his intensity. It was the look of a man having his last hope extinguished. I know, he said, his voice thick with a sorrow that mirrored her own. My life. It's small, she tried to explain, her words tumbling over each other. It's a struggle, but it's mine. It's clean. I work hard. I pay my bills. I try to be a good person. I can't sit on a couch bought with money that came from hurting people. It was a cruel thing to say, but it was the truth. It was the core of who she was, the principle she could not betray, not even for the aching love she felt for him. He nodded slowly, accepting her judgment. I understand. She took another step back, then another. Goodbye, Jinwoo. She turned and ran. She did not look back because she knew if she saw the look on his face, she would stop. And she could not afford to stop. She ran from the man she was falling in love with and from the dark, violent world that would consume her if she stayed. The days after she left him were muted, the color bled from the world. Maya went through the motions. Wake up, go to the coffee shop, force a smile for customers, go home. Work on design projects that now felt meaningless, sleep, repeat. The routine that had once been her comfort was now a constant grinding reminder of what she had lost. Every tall, well-dressed man who walked through the door made her heart leap with a sick, hopeful jolt, only to crash back to earth when it was not him. She missed his quiet presence in the corner. She missed his low voice, his intense gaze, the surprising gentleness of his hands. She missed the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life. You did the right thing, Chloe told her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders as Maya stared blankly at her laptop screen. He's a crime boss, Maya, a gangster. Your life would have been in constant danger. You would have had to become someone you're not. I know, Maya whispered. I know. But knowing it did not make the ache in her chest any less real. It did not fill the hollow space he had left behind. She felt his absence like a phantom limb. She would find herself wanting to tell him about a funny customer or show him a new design she was proud of before remembering, with a fresh wave of pain, that she could not. She had chosen safety over love, principles over passion. It felt like a righteous choice, but it also felt like a life sentence. For Jinwoo, Maya's absence was not a void, it was an active, roaring torment. The silence in his car was no longer just heavy, it was filled with her phantom laughter. His sterile apartment, once a refuge of quiet control, now felt like a tomb. Every corner held a memory of her. The spot on the sofa where she sketched, the kitchen where she had tried and failed to teach him how to cook, the window she had looked out of while she told him about the snow in Chicago. He had let her go. It was the only decent thing he had ever done. He knew her light was too bright to be dragged into his darkness. But the decency of the act brought him no comfort. It only amplified his own damnation. His work became his only outlet. He grew colder, more ruthless. The whispers in the underworld changed. Kwon Jin-woo was no longer just his father's son. He was a king solidifying his reign with ice and iron. He crushed a rival faction that had been testing his borders, the violence swift and brutal. He consolidated power, his every move precise and unforgiving. Min Jun watched him with growing alarm. "Sir," he said one evening after Jinwoo had ordered a devastating financial attack on a competitor, "this is not you." "This is exactly who I am," Jinwoo snapped, his eyes cold and empty. "It is what she saw, is it not? A monster. So I will be a monster." "She did not see a monster," Min Jun said quietly. "She saw a man, and she was afraid of his world. There is a difference." Jin Woo sank into his chair, the anger draining out of him, leaving behind only a vast, desolate exhaustion. Min Jun was right. Maya had not run from him. She had run from his life. The life his father had built, the life he had been shackled to since birth. "My version of survival is different." His own words came back to haunt him. He had been surviving. He had never truly lived. Maya had shown him what living could feel like. Warmth, laughter, the simple joy of sharing noodles on a lumpy couch. A thought began to form in his mind, a tiny, dangerous seed of rebellion. What if he did not have to survive this way? What if he could change the world he commanded? His father had built this empire on blood and fear. What if he could rebuild it into something else? Something legitimate. The idea was insane. It was heresy. It would be seen as a weakness by his enemies and a betrayal by his allies. The old guard, men loyal to his father's brutal vision, would never stand for it. It might very well get him killed. He looked at the picture he kept in his desk drawer, a candid photo Min Jun had taken of Maya laughing in the coffee shop, her face alight with a joy he had stolen from her. He would risk it. He would risk it all, for the chance, however slim, to build a world she could live in. The war began not with guns, but with spreadsheets. Jin Woo spent weeks locked in his office with a team of forensic accountants, men whose loyalty he had purchased at an exorbitant price. They mapped the vast, tangled web of the Golden Dragon Syndicate, separating the legitimate businesses, construction, logistics, private equity, from the illegal ones, the nightclubs that were fronts for money laundering, the shipping routes used for smuggling, the protection rackets that bled small businesses dry. The illegal enterprises were the most profitable. They were the bedrock of his family's power, and he was going to tear them down. His first move was to sell off the string of high-end nightclubs. He did not sell them to a rival. He sold them to a legitimate hospitality corporation from Singapore, a clean break. The news sent shockwaves through the syndicate. His father, Chairman Kwan, long retired but still a terrifying specter, summoned him to the family estate. The old man sat in a wheelchair, a blanket over his withered legs, but his eyes were as sharp and cruel as ever. "You are a fool," the chairman hissed, his voice a dry rattle. "You are selling our strength. You are spitting on my legacy." "Your legacy is a stain," Jin Woo replied, his voice calm and even. He would not show fear, not in front of this man. "It is a prison. I am setting us free." "Free?" His father cackled, a horrible, rasping sound. "There is no freedom for men like us. There is only power, and you are giving it away. Our enemies will see this. They will smell your weakness. They will come for you." "Let them come," Jin Woo said. And they did. The transition was bloody and chaotic. He cut off the revenue streams for the old guard, the captains who had served his father. They saw it as a declaration of war. There were attempts on his life. A car bomb that Min Jun's foresight narrowly averted, an ambush in a parking garage that ended in a brutal close-quarters firefight, leaving Jin Woo with a fresh scar on his arm and 2 fewer enemies. He fought back not with the old methods, but with new ones. He used his immense financial power to bankrupt his internal rivals. He fed anonymous tips to the police, letting the authorities clean up the messes he had created. He was dismantling his own empire from the inside out, piece by painful piece. It was like performing surgery on himself without anesthesia. Through it all, the image of Maya was his guiding star. He was not just tearing down the old world, he was building a new one. He poured the capital from the sale of his illicit assets into legitimate, forward-thinking ventures: green energy, tech startups, a massive urban renewal project in a forgotten district of Seoul. He was laundering his family's name, scrubbing it clean with a desperate, ferocious determination. He never contacted her. He knew words were meaningless. He had to show her. The change had to be real, tangible, and irreversible. He had to build a kingdom clean enough for a queen like her. He had to become a man she would not have to run from. It took nearly a year of fighting, of bleeding, of rebuilding. A year of loneliness so profound it felt like a physical illness. But finally, the day came. The gala was the public unveiling of his magnum opus, the Elysian Project, the massive urban renewal initiative. It was a partnership with the city itself, a symbol of his new legitimacy. He had become what his father had always scoffed at: a philanthropist, a businessman, a civic leader. He had traded the shadows for the spotlight. He sent her an invitation, a simple, elegant card with no name, just a date, a time, and an address. He did not know if she would come. He did not know if she even still lived in Seoul. It was a shot in the dark, a prayer sent out into the void. And then, that night, he saw her, standing by the doors, looking as lost and as beautiful as he remembered. The sight of her stole the air from his lungs, making the entire year of struggle worth it. That was the moment his ex-wife, Soo-jin, chose to strike. Her family was part of the old world, a dynasty of moneylenders he had financially crippled during his purge. Their marriage had been a cold, strategic alliance arranged by his father, and it had dissolved with bitter acrimony years ago. Her words were meant to be daggers, aimed at the heart of his new identity. "I left him because he was weak," she crowed, "too weak to be his father's son." Jinwoo heard her, but the words had no power. They were echoes from a life he no longer lived. He looked past her, past the cameras and the whispers, and his eyes found Maya. He saw the worry on her face, the protective concern, and he smiled. A real smile, full of a hope he had not allowed himself to feel for a year. He was not weak. He had never been stronger, because he was finally fighting for something more than survival. He was fighting for her. After the gala, after the last of the guests and reporters had departed, he found her on the balcony where she had been standing all night. The cool night air swirled around them, carrying the distant sounds of the city. She had her arms wrapped around herself, not, he thought, from the cold, but from uncertainty. "You came," he said softly, his voice full of a year's worth of longing. "I got your invitation," she replied, not looking at him. She stared out at the sprawling city lights. "I wasn't sure if I should. Chloe said it was a trap." "Is that what this feels like?" She finally turned to him. Her eyes searched his face, taking in the new lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the faint scar on his arm visible below his rolled-up sleeve. "I don't know what this is. I heard what your ex-wife said. Soo-jin belongs to the past," he said simply, "a past I burned to the ground." "I read about you in the news," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "The corporate wunderkind, the reclusive philanthropist, they make you sound like a saint." "I am not a saint, Maya," he said, taking a step closer. The space between them crackled with unspoken history. "I have done things this past year. Necessary things. To get here. My hands are not clean, but the empire I rule now is. The money is. I sold the nightclubs. I dismantled the rackets. I cut ties with the old world. It was difficult." Difficult was a laughable understatement for the war he had waged, but he would not burden her with the details of the bloodshed. He had done it so she would never have to know. "Why?" she asked, the single word holding all the weight of their painful goodbye. "Why would you do all that?" He was standing in front of her now, so close he could smell the faint, familiar scent of her perfume. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before he gently cupped her cheek. Her skin was warm, real. She did not pull away. "You told me you couldn't sit on a couch bought with money that came from hurting people," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "So I built a new house, with a new foundation. I did it for you, Maya. I did it all for you. Tears welled in her eyes, shimmering in the city lights. She leaned into his touch, a silent surrender. Jin-woo. I know I don't deserve you, he continued, his voice breaking, and I know I can't erase who I was, but that man is gone. I killed him, and I am asking you, if the man I am now is one you could build a life with. She did not answer with words. She surged forward, her hands coming up to frame his face, and she kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, hungry collision a year in the making. It was a kiss of forgiveness, of acceptance, of a love that had refused to die. It was all the lonely nights, all the fear, all the heartbreak poured into one frantic, soul-shattering moment. He wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her off her feet, pulling her tight against him as if he could absorb her into himself, terrified that if he let go, she would disappear again. Her tears mixed with his as they clung to each other on the balcony, high above the city that had once been his prison, but was now the backdrop to his redemption. He had torn down his kingdom and built it anew, all for her. And now, holding her in his arms, he was finally, truly home. 6 months later, the morning light streamed into the bedroom, painting golden stripes across the crisp, white sheets. Jin-woo woke slowly, the feeling of warmth beside him a comfort that still felt new, precious. He turned his head on the pillow and watched Maya sleep. Her face was relaxed, free of the lines of worry and struggle that had been etched there when he first met her. She looked peaceful. She looked happy. Her freelance graphic design business was thriving. He had, with uncharacteristic subtlety, become her first and largest client, commissioning a massive branding package for the Elysian project through a third-party firm. She had won the contract on her own merit, never knowing he was behind it, and the success had given her a confidence that was dazzling to behold. She no longer worked at the coffee shop. She no longer had to choose between paying bills and buying groceries. Their life was not a fairy tale. The echoes of his past remained. Min-jun was still a constant, albeit more discreet, presence. There were still threats from the ghosts of the old world, resentful rivals who had not forgiven his betrayal of their code. But they were manageable threats, business disputes and legal challenges, not ambushes in parking garages. He met them with lawyers and contracts now, not with violence. Maya stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She smiled when she saw him watching her. It was a soft, sleepy smile that made his heart ache with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "You're staring," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. "I'm admiring," he corrected, tracing the line of her jaw, his fingers brushing over her cheek. "I have a lot of lost time to make up for." She captured his hand, bringing it to her lips and kissing his knuckles, right over the faded scar from the firefight. She knew. He had not told her the violent details of his transformation. But she was not naive. She knew what it had cost him to build this new life for them. She had seen the weight he carried, and she had chosen to help him carry it. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "I was thinking about a rainy Tuesday," he confessed, "and a woman who offered me a towel." She laughed, a sound that was pure music. "And I was thinking about a ridiculously handsome, intimidating man who bought all my pastries." "I was trying to be thoughtful," he defended himself, a rare smile touching his own lips. "You were being insane," she countered, snuggling closer to him. "And it was the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me." He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest, breathing in the scent of her hair. He was still Kwon Jinwoo, a man of immense power and wealth, but he was no longer a king on a throne of fear. He was just a man in love with a woman who had shown him how to be free. She was his resilient heart, and he was her redeemed king. Together, they had built their own small kingdom, not on power or money, but on the unshakable foundation of a love that had conquered darkness. This love story teaches us that true strength isn't found in dominance or control, but in the courage to change for the better. It suggests that no one is beyond redemption if they are willing to dismantle the parts of their life that cause harm, all for the sake of a love that demands a better version of themselves. It's a powerful reminder that love can be a catalyst for profound transformation, inspiring us to build a new world rather than remain trapped in a broken one. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. Please show your support by liking this video, subscribing to our channel for more stories like this, and sharing it with someone who appreciates a tale of redemption and powerful love. What did you think of Jinwoo's decision to completely change his entire life for Maya? Was it a grand romantic gesture or an impossibly risky move? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. For our next story, who would you like to see find love? Vote now. A. Min Jun, the loyal second-in-command who deserves his own happiness. B. Chloe, Maya's feisty and protective best friend.